You see on the last play from Caitlin, and then on top of that, what do you think of your team's late game execution?
I thought she got fouled. I think it's pretty egregious what's been happening to us the last few games. A minus 31 free throw discrepancy. And I might be able to understand it if we were just chucking threes, but we're not. We're attacking the rim.
All right, hold onto your whistles because the WNBA drama just hit a boiling point. And this time, it's coming straight from the Indiana Fever's head coach. For weeks, fans and analysts have watched Caitlin Clark take incredibly brutal fouls on the court. Play that many argue goes far beyond hard-nosed defense, while the referees seem to swallow their whistles. But now, Coach Stephanie White has allegedly had enough, stepping into the post-game press conference and unleashing a fiery critique on the officiating that has the league scrambling and everyone asking, will the WNBA finally step up and protect its biggest star, or are we heading for a breaking point? You're watching WNBA Scoop, and we're dissecting the explosive comments, the shocking foul disparity, and whether this public pressure will finally force the refs to call a fair game.
This don't make no sense, man. This don't make no sense. I think Stephanie White has had enough of all the bullshit going on in the WNBA. Caitlin Clark being hurt, yeah, she might be hurt, but I don't believe it's to the magnitude of what people saying. I think this is a message they sending out that we've done taking all this roughhousing and no fouls and all this BS and ain't getting no foul call.
Stephanie White didn't just step onto the court. She stepped up to the microphone after a tough loss, and according to reports, she didn't hold back, lighting up the refs as if they've completely forgotten the rules of basketball. After weeks of watching Caitlin Clark take brutal, often uncalled fouls, the Fever coach reportedly reached her limit and finally said what many have been thinking. Enough is enough. She wasn't just earning a technical foul with heated complaints in the moment. She was delivering a calculated, fiery critique of the consistent officiating against her team, highlighting what she claimed was an egregious disparity in free throws. Her primary target wasn't the opposing team. It was the referees themselves, and she reportedly hit them with the numbers. White pointed to a stunning minus 31 free throw discrepancy for her team over the last few games, arguing that this imbalance makes no sense given how her team plays. She stated she might be able to understand it if they were just launching three-pointers, but she emphasized that her team, and specifically Clark, is attacking the basket and initiating contact. This isn't just a coach complaining after a loss. This is a direct accusation of unfair, biased officiating that she claims is actively hurting her team, and implicitly allowing opposing players to take excessive liberties with physical contact against her star player.
So as you can see after the game, Caitlin Clark and Sophie are both running up to the referee here. They are both so upset, and the referee is just walking away from them. He won't even look at them in the face. He keeps turning, like Sophie even went up at one point and is like tapping on his arm. He would not even look at them. You guys, I have watched so much basketball in my lifetime, so much NBA, so much professional basketball. It's comical at times when you see the players after the games talking to the refs, because a lot of them end up knowing each other at a certain point because they've reffed their game so many times. The fact that this referee wouldn't even acknowledge the players was kind of crazy to me. Like when I saw that, I said, this is really strange, because the referee should have enough confidence in the calls that they made to at least discuss. You should be able to at least discuss something with the players, because a lot of times players will go up and be like, why did you call that? What did you see? What was going on? And there's a back and forth that's happening. This guy's literally running away from them.
Stephanie White has finally voiced what seemingly every Caitlin Clark fan, casual WNBA viewer, and even many impartial observers have suspected for weeks. The WNBA referees aren't consistently officiating clean basketball. They're allegedly refereeing a gladiator arena where excessive physicality is routinely allowed, only blowing their whistles for Clark when she commits a clear foul, or perhaps, as some critics sarcastically suggest, exhales too loudly. The Indiana Fever, according to this perspective, could throw out their playbook and substitute a set of boxing gloves or MMA gear, and the level of contact allowed on the court reportedly wouldn't change significantly. What's unfolding on the court during some Fever games isn't just perceived as hard-nosed defense, it's being called outright assault and bare-knuckle brawling by frustrated fans and observers, with the officials allegedly turning a constant blind eye. The game, in these moments, is reportedly no longer about fundamental basketball. It's become a chaotic melee where one player, in particular, seems to be targeted with excessive physicality, all under the guise of standard regulation.
But if anything, this should be a lesson to the league and a lesson to the officiating. Because the amount of contact that is allowed without a foul call and the amount of physicality that Caitlin Clark has to battle through being double teamed and triple teamed, and honestly, it's mostly just not being called for these fouls, needs to be assessed. Caitlin Clark is the league's star player, whether you like it or not. It shows in the bottom line, it shows in the revenue, it shows in the viewership numbers. Every which way you turn, it shows.
The frustration with the officiating isn't limited to the coach. Cameras after the game reportedly captured Caitlin Clark and teammate Sophie Cunningham approaching a referee, both visibly upset. What was striking wasn't just their complaint, but the referee's reaction. He reportedly kept turning away, refusing to make eye contact or acknowledge the players, simply walking away from them. Cunningham even reportedly tried tapping him on the arm to get his attention, but he would not even look at them. This lack of willingness from the official to even acknowledge or discuss calls with the players, something common in professional basketball, struck many as incredibly strange and dismissive, adding to the perception that the officials were actively avoiding accountability or discussion regarding the controversial calls, or non-calls, that occurred during the game.
All right, now this is what I'm going to say about this situation, is the Fever players, you got to know, this is how they're going to ref your games. They're going to let Caitlin Clark be held, be hand-checked, have her arm chopped, and they're barely going to call fouls. Because players are going to get away with what they get away with. If you allow a player to foul a player all game long, guess what? They're going to foul them all game long.
Let's be blunt. According to frustrated fans and commentators, many of the fouls Caitlin Clark appears to take aren't just minor infractions. They look like daylight muggings happening with thousands of witnesses in the arena, a camera crew broadcasting live, and ESPN showing it to a national audience. In just one Fever possession, some argue there's more physical contact against Clark than in some people's last 10 family reunions. And the referees, they're reportedly watching it all unfold with a perceived indifference, letting excessive contact slide without a hint of concern or a blast of the whistle. According to critics, there's no pretense of fairness or objectivity in these moments, just raw, unapologetic bias on full display in the way the game is being called, particularly against Clark. The game, in these instances, has allegedly lost its integrity, replaced by chaos and constant, confusing non-calls that seem more about controlling the spectacle of the game's newfound attention than consistently officiating fundamental basketball and protecting the players. It's blatant, unfiltered bias, according to these perspectives, and everyone who watches can allegedly see it clearly. But if anything positive can come from this, critics argue, this intense scrutiny and pressure should be a wake-up call to the league leadership, and specifically, the head of officiating. The sheer amount of contact that is allowed against Caitlin Clark without a foul call, the level of physicality she has to battle through while being double-teamed and triple-teamed, needs to be immediately and thoroughly assessed. Caitlin Clark is undeniably the league's star player, whether you like her or not. It shows in the bottom line, the revenue, the viewership numbers, the ticket sales, every which way you turn, her impact is visible and quantifiable.
Now that right there is Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark, that's her, out there on the basketball court, chilling, out there shooting jumpers. Y'all see that? Her jumper look wet too. Now you supposed to be hurt and chilling with your leg up, feet up. You out here shooting jumpers. So what that lead me to believe is that her injury can't be too like, is it that bad? They say it's a grade 1. Okay, cool. Even if it's a grade 1, would you be out there shooting jumpers? Caitlin Clark is at the practice arena shooting 3-pointers. This might just be a message that Stephanie is like, you know what? Y'all ain't gonna do nothing. Y'all ain't gonna fix this. Y'all gonna keep letting my player get hound. Okay, cool. I'm gonna hit you where it hurt. I'm gonna hit y'all in your pockets.
The league claims it wants growth, higher ratings, and mainstream respect. Yet, according to critics, It appears to allow Caitlin Clark, arguably the most marketable rookie the league has ever seen, perhaps since legends in other sports like LeBron James, to be physically assaulted by opposing players who seem to treat defense against her like a WWE audition or a contact sport beyond basketball norms. The WNBA's alleged response to this physical play, critics argue, has been largely inadequate, a shrug, perhaps a vague feminist tweet about physicality, and the continuation of this chaotic, overly physical play on the court. Meanwhile, officials reportedly seem to be watching a different game entirely, one where excessive contact is permitted, because it sure as hell doesn't resemble the fundamental rules of basketball that are applied to other players or in other leagues.
And as the league's star player, she should not be bullied around or ragdolled, just pushed around like she is. There is an undeniable disparity in the officiating. I mean, think about the Kobe whistle in the NBA. No one touched him without an issue. I remember Draymond Green saying if anything happened to Steph, Draymond Green would get up in a player's face. That's not to say that there shouldn't be fairness in the officiating. Yes, Caitlin Clark should be called for fouls, but the fairness is what is being disputed here, in that she is being pushed around and not being calling, and that only hurts the league. It only hurts the eyes on the league because she is the star player. Like in the Atlanta game, it almost seemed like the strategy was to just like hack them and like kind of get up in Caitlin Clark's face by like all the hand checks and things that just were not called. So hopefully this is a wake-up call to the league.
Critics point to specific instances of aggressive play against Clark, calling them examples of outright negligence by officials. They ask, if knives aren't allowed on the court for obvious safety reasons, why are players seemingly allowed to use talons sharp enough to carve initials into hardwood or deliver contact resembling Carrington's claws near players' faces? Some players, they claim, walk around with nails long and sharp enough to cause significant injury, and no one seems to care or enforce rules around it. It's as if, critics argue, we're watching Hunger Games Courtside Edition, where players are subjected to excessive physical risk without adequate protection from officials. The controversial foul by Chicago's Chennedy Carter against Clark, a hard shoulder check away from the ball, wasn't just hard. Many viewed it as a potential felony on the court. Met with cheers from some in the crowd, yet the initial call was just a common foul later upgraded.
Start off by sharing that the officiating in the WNBA became as hot button of an issue as any. Heated debates surrounding the league's physicality dominated the headlines, particularly when Indiana Fever star rookie Caitlin Clark was subject to several intentional fouls.
Meanwhile, the WNBA leadership is allegedly too busy tweeting empowerment slogans and posting IG reels about sisterhood and physicality to notice that their main asset, their star player driving unprecedented attention, is reportedly being body checked like she owes someone money, treated like a crash test dummy on national television. Critics argue there are too few fines, too few ejections for excessive contact, and a disturbing lack of accountability from officials. Just silence from league leadership and vague statements about letting players play. But what they're really allowing, critics vehemently argue, is players being pummeled. This isn't perceived as fundamental basketball, it's chaos masked as sport, and the league's perceived complacency and inaction are, in the eyes of critics, criminal. Fans, they argue, deserve better than to watch a chaotic, inconsistently officiated product. Players deserve to be protected from excessive physicality and potential injury. And most of all, the game itself deserves integrity, not a spectacle of violence, bias, and perceived neglect from the officials whose job is to uphold the rules. But here's where the narrative gets tricky, and where critics face pushback. Some argue that the Fever players themselves need to adapt, suggesting they should know by now how their games are going to be refereed. They claim the officials are going to continue to let Caitlin Clark be held, be hand-checked, have her arm chopped, and that the Fever need to adjust their play style because opposing players will get away with what the refs allow. If you allow a player to foul another player excessively all game long without consequence, critics acknowledge, guess what? They're going to continue to foul them all game long.
So lads, today we're going to be talking a little bit about the old New York-Indiana game, which was one of the weirdest, like, I'm not even going to say it was badly refereed until down the stretch, but it was one of the worst refereed game. It was one of the worst refereed games I've seen. But in a long, long time.
Meanwhile, Stephanie White is out here doing what she believes is necessary, publicly calling out the league and its refs like she's had enough of managing chaos and advocating for her star players' safety. Can you blame her? She's reportedly trying to coach basketball strategy and execution, not navigate a constant minefield of unchecked violence and inconsistent calls on the court. While some referees reportedly seem more interested in avoiding accountability or discussion after games, she's not just coaching a team of athletes. She's allegedly managing the potential trauma and frustration in real time that comes from watching your star player take repeated hard hits without protection. Critics argue the league lacks structural consistency in its officiating. And without that, corruption, or at least the perception of bias or corruption, allegedly festers like mold in a forgotten lunchbox. Every bad call, or worse, every glaring no call, is seen as a seed of doubt planted in the minds of fans tuning in. Is this just basic incompetence from officials, or is someone, or some group, ensuring the popular, potentially disruptive pretty white girl doesn't shine too brightly, too quickly, or too easily, particularly if her success highlights the shortcomings of others? The question for some is whether the blatant inconsistency is intentional.
I'm going to talk about this play. The person who really should get all the blame is Kathy Engelberg. Yes, this is Kathy Engelberg's doing. You know why? Because she has incompetent referees.
Critics pose hypothetical questions to highlight the perceived bias. If Caitlin Clark played for a dominant, established team like the Las Vegas Aces, a team that already pulls in significant cash and receives major media coverage, would she be getting tackled in transition, elbowed in the face, and consistently sent home with an ice pack and a generic "keep going" tweet from the league? For many, the answer is a resounding no, suggesting the aggressive play and lack of calls against her are targeted, intentional, and driven by a disturbing inconsistency in officiating standards applied to her versus other players. Critics argue this isn't a simple learning curve for new referees. It's perceived as an execution of a biased approach. Such blatant neglect and inconsistent officiating allegedly makes fans question whether they should invest emotionally, financially, or even just with their viewing time in a league that doesn't appear willing to protect its biggest assets. If the league won't protect its stars from excessive physicality, the on-court product suffers, the drama overshadows the sport, and the league's credibility takes a significant hit every time officials appear to look the other way or swallow their whistles on clear fouls.
I'm really convinced at this point that all the girls in the WNBA hate Caitlin Clark. She's filling seats. This is a time for y'all to be shining. Instead of fighting the young lady, shine. Go out on the court, show what you made of. But no, you know what they decide to do? They get angry. Brittany Griner made a comment talking about every time she comes around and plays them, she hears a rumbling in the stands. She couldn't understand. She didn't really understand it was people up there. Yes, because they want to pay to see basketball and not politics. Leave the race out of it. God damn, why we have to make everything so god?
Critics argue that fans deserve better than to watch perceived unfairness, and players deserve to be protected from unnecessary risk of injury. But what is being done to hold these referees accountable? Are there transparent reviews, suspensions, or fines for consistently missing calls or demonstrating bias? Or is it, as some cynically suggest, just a cycle of mediocrity where no one gets fired because everyone involved in the officiating process is perceived as failing together in consistency and fairness? Many argue that the officiating calls for an outside, independent investigation, not just internal reviews or oversight from the league itself, which might be seen as having its own biases.
But what's being done to her right now is an absolute shame. She is by far the most important, most popular person the WNBA has ever seen in its history. And yet she's getting treated like crap every time.
Critics emphasize that Caitlin Clark is not asking for preferential treatment or a superstar whistle like legends in other leagues may have received. She is simply asking for the fundamental officiating standards, the basic rules of basketball regarding fouls and physical contact, to be applied equally to her as they are to other players on the court. And that, they argue, clearly seems to be too much to ask in a league that, to them, appears to prioritize optics, narratives, and perceived vibes over fundamental justice, fairness, and consistency in calling the game by the book. Critics argue that the league isn't unaware of these glaring issues with officiating. It is choosing to ignore them, potentially for reasons related to perceived narratives, established players, or a misguided idea of letting physicality define the game. That perceived indifference is allegedly slowly but surely eroding the league's credibility from the inside out, undermining the integrity of the sport, and potentially jeopardizing its future growth. Critics feel strongly that the officiating in the WNBA, particularly surrounding Caitlin Clark, has become as hot a button issue as any debate about physicality. They argue that fans see it clearly, coaches see it clearly, as evidenced by Stephanie White's comments, and players with any sense of dignity and respect for the game also see the blatant inconsistency. The only ones allegedly remaining oblivious or unwilling to act are the officials with whistles and the authority to call the game fairly. Critics argue that it seems like once you're certified as a WNBA referee, your main role is to see how much excessive physicality players, particularly one specific player, can endure before they potentially suffer a major injury. The controversial play by Chicago's Chennedy Carter, where she delivered a shoulder check against Clark away from the ball, is often cited by critics as a prime example. They ask if Chelsea Gray, an established star, were to get elbowed in the face without a call, don't be surprised if the next Indiana Fever game turns into an actual MMA match, suggesting the inconsistency is leading to escalating physicality and potential for real injury. Critics argue it's time to stop pretending these officials are truly officiating by the rules. Instead, they appear to be actively enabling chaos and excessive physicality with a passive smile or a swallowed whistle. They argue the refs are complicit in the injuries, the frustration of coaches and players, and the eroding trust from fans who tuned in for top-tier professional basketball, not a rerun of 1990s hockey where fighting was commonplace and rules were loosely enforced. Critics often highlight players like Carrington, presumably referring to Chicago's Chennedy Carter, who delivered the controversial foul, whose alleged highlight this season has been her uncanny ability to deliver seemingly targeted shoulder checks with pinpoint accuracy, like a heat-seeking missile aimed specifically at slowing down players like Clark. If her goal was simply to serve as a physical deterrent, critics concede, mission accomplished. But if this is meant to represent the league's future or its acceptable level of physicality, critics argue, that's deeply concerning. They claim that if the WNBA truly aims to grow and elevate its reputation as a premier professional sports league, it simply cannot allow players who seem to prioritize delivering hard hits and physical contact over playing fundamental defense to maul its star players without consistent penalty. The league, critics emphasize, must prioritize player safety and fairness in officiating over allowing chaotic, overly physical play that risks injury. Otherwise, it risks losing both players' well-being and the crucial trust of the fans who are driving its current popularity surge. Critics argue that players who engage in such excessive physicality, particularly away from the ball, should face severe consequences, perhaps even outright expulsion from the game or league, to send a clear message that violence is not a legitimate strategy for defending in the WNBA. They argue that if a player cannot defend effectively without resorting to potentially injurious physical contact, maybe they should consider a different career, perhaps one where that kind of physical contact is expected and regulated, like MMA. Critics lament that the WNBA has never enjoyed more attention than it does now, yet it has allegedly managed to mishandle that spotlight so badly that the controversies surrounding officiating and physicality are overshadowing the game itself. Fans, they argue, want to see exciting basketball, not their favorite players battered like piñatas on every possession. Critics emphasize that this isn't just about protecting Caitlin Clark specifically. It's about what the consistent lack of calls and perceived bias signals to every young girl watching, every aspiring player, and every fan. It signals that even when you're incredibly talented, when you've earned your spot through hard work and dedicated your life to excellence, the league may not protect you from excessive physicality or call the game fairly. Critics argue the league leadership, specifically Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, must take a stand, address the officiating crisis, protect its players, and preserve the integrity of the game before more fans turn away in disgust, disillusioned by what they perceive as a biased and dangerous product. Critics argue that Commissioner Kathy Engelbert is ultimately to blame for this officiating crisis, claiming it's her doing because she is responsible for the referees and the standards of officiating. They assert that if this violence and inconsistent officiating continue, Caitlin Clark should seriously consider sitting out games, not just to send a message to the league and its leadership, but primarily to protect herself from potential injury. They argue she should prioritize collecting her paycheck, safeguarding her knees and her long-term health, and avoiding the humiliation and risk of being treated like a crash test dummy every night on national television. Right now, for critics, the court during some Fever games feels less like a competitive professional arena and more like a war zone where referees are standing by passively, as if they're watching a street fight they refuse to intervene in or stop. Critics argue that Caitlin Clark is not just a rookie experiencing a normal welcome to the league rough patch. She is, in their view, a once-in-a-generation talent being allowed to be physically attacked and flattened under the rim, while officials consistently turn a blind eye, swallowing their whistles as if it's part of their uniform or a deliberate strategy. Critics are clear and firm. Caitlin Clark owes nothing, absolutely nothing, to a league that, in their eyes, refuses to protect its most valuable asset and its stars from what they deem as outright assault on the court. They argue there is no rite of passage for a rookie that involves concussions, potential injuries, or flagrant fouls being dismissed as routine play on calls. The WNBA, critics contend, should be rolling out red carpets and bubble wrap for Clark, protecting her talent and ensuring her safety, not allowing her to become a punching bag for what some perceive as bitter veterans or insecure opponents looking to make a physical statement against a popular rookie. Critics emphasize that there is a stark difference between a player earning their place through skill, hard work, and competitive play, and being used as a punching bag with a ponytail by opponents who are not being adequately penalized by officials. The league, critics demand, needs to step up immediately, address the officiating crisis, and protect its talent before more players get hurt, lose faith in the game's integrity, or decide the risk isn't worth it. Critics feel strongly that all the girls in the WNBA don't necessarily hate Caitlin Clark, but they perceive a palpable resentment towards her success and the attention she's bringing. They argue that while Clark is filling seats and bringing unprecedented visibility, a moment where everyone in the league could be shining, some players are reportedly choosing to fight the young lady and get angry instead of focusing on their own game and capitalizing on the increased attention. They point to comments like Brittany Griner's, who reportedly expressed annoyance at the crowds and the rumbling in the stands, suggesting she didn't understand why people were there. Critics argue people are there because they want to pay to see basketball, not politics or off-court drama, and they lament that some players seem to inject race into the conversation unnecessarily. Critics argue that the officiating crisis isn't just about a few isolated missed calls. Everyone makes mistakes. But this, they argue, is different. This is perceived as systemic, routine, and a blatant display of eyes wide shut officiating happening consistently on a national stage. It's as if, critics argue, officials are rehearsing for a Cirque du Flagrant act, instead of focusing on consistently calling a fair game according to the rules. It's not just labeled as poor officiating, it's called a full-blown abdication of responsibility, malpractice, and a dereliction of duty that critics find tragically laughable only because it's so dangerous for the players involved. Every no call when Caitlin Clark appears to get smashed with a forearm, every blind eye turned as she's hacked on her way to the basket. Critics argue it's no longer incompetence, it's perceived as complicity. They argue that by not calling the game consistently by the rules, officials are sending a dangerous message to every young player with talent and heart. Play your game, but don't expect protection, don't expect fairness, and definitely don't expect us, the officials, to consistently care about enforcing the rules when you're on the court. Critics argue the officials are failing in their fundamental duty to protect the players and uphold the integrity of the game. They demand either start calling the game fairly and consistently for everyone, or step aside and let someone with better vision and a grasp of basic fairness and the rules take over. The current display of inconsistent officiating is, in their view, an embarrassment to the league and a profound disservice to the players who risk their health and well-being every time they step onto the court, especially the player who is currently driving the league's unprecedented growth. Critics are adamant that what's being done to Caitlin Clark right now is an absolute shame. She is, they argue, by far the most important, most popular person the WNBA has ever seen in its history, the engine of its current success. And yet, she's getting treated, in their view, like crap every time she steps on the court with inconsistent officiating and excessive physicality against her. The numbers, they emphasize, speak volumes. Caitlin Clark is the primary reason casual fans are tuning into the league. She's the magnet, the spark that could finally ignite renewed, widespread interest in the WNBA. And how does the league, through its officiating, appear to reward her? By allegedly allowing her to get blindsided, hand-checked, and physically targeted, while referees act as if they're playing hide-and-seek instead of officiating a professional basketball game. Critics pose a direct question to the league leadership. Do you truly believe that the future of the league is best served by turning its most marketable, impactful star into a cautionary tale about the dangers of playing in the WNBA due to lack of protection? Because, they warn, if that's the approach the league is taking, it's already working. Fans are noticing the perceived bias and unfair treatment, and they are furious, voicing their discontent online and potentially tuning out. Critics argue that if, ultimately, Caitlin Clark decides enough is enough, that the risk of injury and the frustration of inconsistent officiating outweigh the opportunity, and she chooses to leave the league or sit out, no one should act surprised or claim they didn't see it coming. They argue the league leadership, through its inaction on officiating, has effectively written this script. Critics demand that the league's leadership take immediate and decisive responsibility. Instead of effectively growing the game by protecting the talent that draws attention, critics argue the league is fueling resentment among fans and potentially alienating the star player herself. Instead of cultivating basketball greatness and promoting fair play, critics contend the league appears to be stumbling face first into a brick wall of perceived indifference, bias, and perhaps even jealousy from others. Critics are clear. This isn't just tough physical basketball. It's, in their view, a demolition derby happening in sneakers, where the rules are inconsistently applied and players are at risk. They demand that the league's top brass wake up, address these critical officiating issues, and prioritize protecting their talent. Call the game fairly and consistently for everyone, they demand, or watch everything you've recently built crumble into dust as fans and players lose faith in the product. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the alleged WNBA officiating crisis and Coach White's fiery comments, leaving a like and subscribing helps us continue bringing you these important stories. What do you think about the officiating? Should the league do more to protect Caitlin Clark? Drop your opinion in the comments below.